Well, hey everyone. If I haven't met you before, I'm Jordan, pastoral resident, and it is my pleasure to be able to conclude our series entitled Selfless, Living an Others-Oriented Life. And I've really just appreciated Pastor Kirk's teaching over the past couple weeks going through this. And today, I actually want to deliver a message to you that I feel like you have helped me develop. And a great example of that is someone knew that I was coming in to record this today and went outside and put some balloons and some encouraging notes on my car. And so when I tell you what my topic is, I think you'll kind of see how that ties in. And so we've been talking through some of the one another statements in the scriptures. And so today, what I want to talk about is encourage one another. Now, I have a question for you. Is there someone in your life that whenever you see them or you see a text or a phone call from them, you just light up? You just get excited at the thought of being able to talk to this person? Think about that for a moment. And just briefly here, ask yourself the question, why? Why does that person bring that kind of excitement or joy, even just seeing their name? Well, for me, it's a guy named JP. Now, the interesting thing about my relationship with JP is I've only actually ever met him in person a couple times. And that's because over the 7 years of our friendship, we've never lived in the same city. Actually, we've never even lived in the same country. He lives in Colorado, and I'm here in Ontario. Let's go back a little bit. I was at a conference back in 2013, and I was waiting in line for lunch. Now, I don't know about you, but if you don't remember this, a line is where people would stand behind each other and wait to get a service, like fast food or whatever. And I'm waiting in line, and there's this guy in front of me, and we just strike up a conversation. And at the end of the conversation, I just felt like it wasn't done. I wasn't done talking to this guy yet. And so we exchanged phone numbers and started talking on the phone. Now, I don't do this very often, and normally I had been, especially at this time, more accustomed to going out for coffee with somebody or seeing somebody in person. But with this, it was a little bit different because the entirety, really, of our relationship for the first while was on the phone. Until I had the opportunity to actually go and visit him on a couple of occasions and stay at his home with his family. And these have been really great times. We went to see baseball games together. We've went to events together. It's been really great. But the thing about JP that lights me up every time I get the chance to talk to him is that he encourages me. He always seems to have an encouraging word. We went to an event together called the Global Leadership Summit in Chicago. And the one day we were driving home from the conference. And I think there was something in the session that was talking about, recognizing the strengths of others in your life and actually taking the chance to tell them about that. And so we kind of we were having this conversation on the way home in the car, and he started saying some really encouraging and really affirming things to me that I had never heard people say before. And to be honest, my response to him was, oh man, I really appreciate that, but I'm just not sure how to receive that right now. I was in a stage where I wasn't believing in myself, but he believed in me. And it wasn't based on necessarily watching me interact with a lot of different people. Really, it was the product of something deeper and better. And I think today, my goal is that if we could unpack what I think was happening in that conversation with JP that day. And to do that, I want to turn to the book of 1 Thessalonians. Now, this is a letter that was written by Paul, and he also had with him Silas and Timothy. And he was writing this to a church in a place called Thessalonica in Greece. And he had visited this place before. And so Paul starts off the letter by reminiscing about the visit that he had with this church. And he was affirming them in the things that they were doing really well. And then over time, he started wondering how they were doing. He started maybe having a little bit of concern about what was happening in this church. So he sent Timothy. And so the letter continues by talking about Timothy's report back to Paul about this church. And he was telling them about the good news, about the good report that had come. He then takes some time to remind this church about the days that they're living in, about some of the challenges that they're facing, persecutions and things like that. But also talking about the hope that we all have in Christ. He talks about the coming kingdom of God. And then towards the end, he says this in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11. So encourage one another and build each other up, just as you are already doing. And because he had said on a number of occasions that they had been doing this, he had been affirming the good things that they are doing. Now, in this short overview of the book, I know I'm not getting all of the different truths. And so I would encourage you to actually read this book. It is just a couple pages, and it really helps center our lives in the kingdom. Centers our lives in the kingdom. And so I would really encourage you to read that. Now, the question is, how do we encourage? Paul is telling us to encourage and to build each other up. So how do we do that? And I think the answer is actually very simple, but maybe a little bit harder to live out. And it's to pay attention and to call attention. I'm going to say that again. The way that we can encourage others and build each other up in our lives is to pay attention and to call attention. So let's flesh this out a little bit more. What are we paying attention for? The first thing would be to pay attention to the character inside the person. And in 1 Thessalonians 3, verse 8, when referring to Timothy's visit, Paul says this, "It gives us new life, knowing you remain strong in the Lord." He was paying attention, and he was listening to Timothy's report about the character and the works and the lifestyle that these people were living, and he was affirming that. Number two, he paid attention to the longings inside this church. 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 10 says, "And they speak," referring to other believers in Greece, "and they speak of how you are looking forward to the coming of God's Son from heaven, Jesus, whom God raised from the dead." He knew that this church was passionate about the Lord, and he could see that by the way that they lived. But he also knew that they were longing for the world to come. So he was paying attention to the longings of the people, not just the character and the actions. Now, the next part of that is to call attention. So first we pay attention. First we look at our surroundings. We look at the people that we are wanting to encourage. But paying attention and looking and knowing your surroundings is only part of the story. When it really comes out is actually how we speak and what we say. And so there's two different ways, I think, primarily, that we can encourage by calling attention. And the first one is to call people out of difficulty. Proverbs 17:17 says, "A friend is always loyal, and a brother is born to help in time of need." I don't know about you, but I can think of many times where all that I've needed was for someone to call me out of difficulty. Whether it is the loss of a family member, maybe in this season, the loss of a job, maybe it's the loneliness of being single and living by yourself, that we need people to help call us out of our difficulty. But in order to do that, we actually need to sit with people in their difficulty. And I wonder if in our busy world, we forget this sometimes. But I would say that it is really important that if there is someone that you want to encourage, and if you're going to try to call them out of the difficulty in their life, you really need to make that investment of time into the person. The second thing is to call the person into the next right thing. So on the one hand, we're talking about calling someone out of difficulty. We're talking about encouraging someone kind of in a way that is comforting. But then there's also the kind of encouragement that is motivating, calling people to the next right thing. Hebrews 10:24 says, "Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works." I think it's really important that as we are really rubbing shoulders with the people in our lives, as we are having conversations with the people in our lives, especially other believers, we really should take that opportunity, take that focus to encourage people, yes, to help them in their moments of comfort, but also to motivate them to the next right thing. Some of the things that JP called out of me that day are some of the things that I'm living out right now. It's actually kind of interesting. Not too long ago, I was having a conversation with Pam, who's our children and youth director. And it was a really good conversation. We were both encouraging each other. And she had said something about me that actually sparked a bit of a flashback. And then I told her about JP. And I told her how when JP said those things years ago, those things that he was saying to me were the longings of my heart, but I didn't feel like they were my actions or my character yet. And it came full circle when Pam had said some of those same things. So sometimes the encouragement that you give, the motivation that you give someone today, is going to be the compliment that someone else is going to give that person years down the road. But the fact of the matter is this. If we are going to do this, if we are going to comfort people, if we're going to call people into the next right thing, we need to slow down and actually engage in the conversation with people. It's hard to do this from a distance. I recognize that. And that's why even in this season, it's actually been really great for me. One of the blessings that I found is porch visits. Because for so long, I was used to going to restaurants, going to coffee shops. And as much as you think you can have a good conversation in those places, and you can, for me at least, I have found that porch visits have been just that much better because I don't have the distractions of, looking if the server is coming, if I want to wave and get another drink, or, talking too softly because I don't want the people at the next table to hear. So for me at least, and I don't know about you, porch visits, phone calls, things like this have actually allowed me to better focus. So physical proximity isn't what I'm talking about here. It's about focus. It's about prioritizing the person that you're with when you are with that person. I don't know about you, but it really does it hurts sometimes when you're in a conversation with someone and they're constantly answering their phone or looking at other texts or something like that. Because I don't know about you, but I just feel unimportant. I just feel like what I'm contributing to this conversation doesn't actually matter to the other person. And I know that's not always the case. But what I would say is this: if you are really going to be able to pay attention to the character inside a person, to the longings inside a person, and you were going to try to call attention, to call them out of difficulty, and to call them into the next right thing, however you do it, you need to be present and you need to be engaged in order to actually have that quality conversation. When I first came out to Stratford last fall, well, maybe not quite right away, but the first movie that I actually saw in the Stratford movie theater was A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. And it was a movie about Mr. Rogers. And if you don't know who Mr. Rogers is, you know what, sorry, call your parents. Let them tell you who Mr. Rogers is. Even like I grew up watching Mr. Rogers on TV, and he just had these great messages. And in this movie, it was highlighting this reporter that was supposed to write something on Mr. Rogers. But this guy just had a chip on his shoulder. He was really feeling negative. He was having family drama and all of these different things. And he was having the hardest time seeing the genuine love that Fred Rogers was showing to him. But there was a conversation that they had in this movie that was really striking to me. And I've been thinking about this over and over and over again when I think about being present in a conversation. Mr. Rogers says to this reporter, "Do you know what is the most important thing to me right now?" And the guy's like, I don't know. I don't know what's most important to you right now. And he says this: "I'm talking to you. So right now, you are the most important person to me. Our conversation is the most important thing to me right now." That's powerful. Can we say that with honesty to the people that we are talking to? I really hope so. I really hope that we can get to that point where we are so present and we are so involved in the conversation that we are in, that that is the most important thing to us. And it is in that place that this reporter that started off really angry, started off really bitter, saw his heart start to soften. To the kindness that he thought was maybe fake or a show in the beginning became a friendship. So, as I've been thinking about this, I encourage you to think about this. How can we, and I'm including myself here, how can we be more present in the conversations that we're having? How can we speak in a way that brings courage and comfort and motivation to the people that we are with? I'm going to encourage you to really take some time this week with the Lord and ask about this, to think about this, to process this.